iPhone ecosystem has you, or Android does, no YouTube video, camera test, or benchmarks going to move you off it. I've been covering phones long enough to accept that. And yet, I've been carrying both of these phones for like about 6 weeks in my pockets, I have a phone addiction. My wife has made fun of me on more than one occasion. She's not wrong, but I kept doing it because Samsung made something really genuinely interesting this year. Not just like incrementally better, something actually new. And that still doesn't get enough credit. So rather than just like hand you a winner you already picked, let me tell you what 6 weeks of actually using both of these things have taught me. So the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra is $1,300. Obviously, trade-ins and sales happen, but MSRP. iPhone 17 Pro Max is $1,200. And quick note before we go any further, I tested the Pro Max specifically. So when I talk about battery life and screen size, those numbers apply to the Max, but everything else, cameras, performance, software, equally applies to the 17 Pro as well. So if you're considering the smaller one, you're not missing anything I'm covering today except for a bit of screen real estate and battery. All right, so both phones quietly dropped titanium for aluminum this year, and they both upgraded their vapor chamber cooling systems, which I think is its own kind of funny story, especially when you look at the history of Apple's marketing. They spent a solid 2 years and probably hundreds of millions of dollars convincing us that titanium was the future. It was premium, it was aerospace grade, that whole pitch. And Samsung was right there with them, especially goes back to the S24 and the S25 Ultra also had titanium. And now they went back to aluminum, like that whole thing never happened. For Apple, I understand why a little bit, I guess. The aluminum unibody works with the vapor chamber cooling to pull heat away from the A19 Pro processor. So Samsung did something almost identical, I guess. They call it Armor Aluminum, and their vapor chamber is 50% bigger than last year's, and they're saying a 21% better thermal performance. The results on both phones is sustained performance under load without throttling that I think plagued earlier flagships, especially if you were playing like a lot of games. If you guys watched my Pro Max review, you know how much that changed the picture for Apple. I'll link to it down below. Samsung was already way ahead of Apple on this, and they pushed way further ahead this year too. So their Armor Aluminum gets the S26 Ultra down to 214 grams, which is noticeably lighter than the 25 Ultra, which I think brings me to the one thing Samsung still hasn't fixed with their flagship line of phones, and it's getting harder to order at this price. There's no native MagSafe. There's no magnet array in the phone itself, despite it supporting the Qi 2 standard. Pixel 10 has it. Samsung's own cases have the magnets sewn into them, which I think should tell Samsung that people want it. They decided the answer was to buy a case. And at $1,300 in 2026, and I use MagSafe a ton, that was a frustrating place to land. Okay, so on the display side, I covered the privacy display pretty thoroughly in my early impressions video. That'll be down below, but here's the TLDR version of that. Samsung rebuilt the pixel architecture of the screen at a hardware level. Flip that on, and it's a software switch. Anyone looking from the side gets nothing. Gray, dark, it's all gone. What makes it generally useful, not just a demo that I think you do once and forget about, they give you crazy granular control over it, like per app, per notification, automatically on passwords and pins. I've had it running on my banking apps for weeks. I sort of forget that it's there until I'm in a crowded space and realize, no one around me can see what I'm looking at. If you're in a plane or a coffee shop, anywhere you sort of tilted your phone away from the person next to you, this just quietly handles that part. Samsung did leave something out of their launch presentation. So the pixel architecture that makes a privacy display work does have consequences when that feature is turned off completely. And when you do turn it on, this is the part I keep coming back to, the screen takes like a real hit. And I mean things like really noticeably dimmer. The colors that were probably the reason a lot of people bought Samsung phones in the first place do look washed out. You know that signature like Samsung vibrancy where colors pop? I think that made you pick up a Galaxy in store and think it was probably the best screen you've ever seen. It's compromised the moment privacy display is active. Maximum protection mode is even more aggressive. It gets to the point where you're kind of squinting at your own phone to sort of see the brightness. And if you're outdoors, it makes it really hard to see. But I do want to be clear, I still think privacy display is really useful and I use it. And this is a generation 1 implementation, and you do kind of feel that. Samsung built something really innovative and real, but the trade-off they made to get there, I think, is also real. I think the best advice I can give is see it in person first. Go to a store, put it in your hands, turn privacy display on and off, see how your eyes feel about it. Because that screen, think it's a whole decision with this phone. No review, including mine, can sort of make that call for you. So I'll take a quick break just to change some clothes and thank this video's sponsor, Superhuman Go, from the folks at Grammarly. I'm guessing you've heard of Grammarly. I'm also guessing that you've heard of AI. And I'm guessing you probably use it in some way. Maybe using it for research, using it like Google to ask questions, maybe using it for writing emails to your kid's school or helping craft text or doing research for you. But you probably have one AI tool for everything. That's unnecessary. It defeats the purpose of having AI. Superhuman Go fixes that problem. So it lives its whole life inside of the Grammarly extension that I'm guessing you already have, and it just works wherever you're typing. Gmail, Docs, Slack, Telegram like we do here, whatever. It'll do all the reading of the page you're on. So suggestions aren't generic. They actually fit like contextually what you're trying to do. It even connects to your calendar, so you're not bouncing around tabs trying to find a time that works. And the one part that I keep using is called reader reactions. So you write something, it tells you how the person on the other end is going to read it, where they'll get confused, sort of what they'll push back on. Super helpful when you're sending an email that actually matters and you want to get it right the first time. And I really believe that over text and over email, it doesn't always convey the intention of what you're trying to write. And I think what Superhuman Go does here is it makes that gap smaller and the potential for misunderstanding and make sure what you're saying and your tone and your intention way clearer. And it really does work as advertised. If you want to give it a shot to try Superhuman Go and kind of level up your productivity at work or home or just general writing, go to grammarly.com/John R. Link's in the description. If you've got Grammarly, give it a shot, see if you like it, but I guarantee you it's gonna change at least how you write one thing. I don't know if you guys have been following the story, but there's a whole 10-bit thing going on. I'm gonna try to kind of explain this quickly and simply. More bits means more colors the screen can show. Why does that matter? I always come back to like a sunset photo, that gradual kind of deep fade from that, real rich orange down to blue sky. On like a lesser panel, you can sometimes see it stepping, like distinct bands of color. Instead of a smooth transition, the more color depth you have eliminates that. It makes your photos look more like what you actually saw. Samsung told the press that Unpacked, the S26 Ultra, have finally made the jump to a true 10-bit panel. Remember, more bits the better. And the media reported on it. People pre-ordered, I think, based on that information. About a week later, Samsung quietly walked it back. Said the panel is still 8-bit, same as last year, but using a software workaround to simulate better color depth. All right, talk about cameras. 'Cause after all that display conversation, I think it deserves some good news. All my camera reviews are just baseball pictures. That's all I do when I'm not working. So I took both phones to my oldest son Nate's travel game last weekend. And just to be equal opportunity baseball dad, here's my 10-year-old son playing up with 12-year-olds, and he started his very first game. So here's an iPhone video in wide angle of him throwing a strike just because I'm proud and I can work it in here because it's an iPhone video. Oh, strike! When you're shooting in bright light, Samsung actually lifts the shadows and desaturates sort of a little bit. But in softer light, the colors popped hard. It handles pure white really well. And the sharpness, I thought, was fantastic. In a lot of scenes, Samsung's actually closer to true life than the iPhone. iPhone, on the other hand, sort of pushed warmer overall. Skin tones looked more natural. Greens, I thought, were very accurate, but the rest of the color palette, I thought, again, warmer. In challenging light, the iPhone lifts contrast. I think it could lose some saturation. It definitely prioritizes sort of a look over strict accuracy. And when you're just looking at an iPhone photo by itself, it just looks like an iPhone photo. When you put it next to Samsung, you start to see what Apple's doing kind of under the hood. Let's talk about zoom a little bit. Apple's moved from 5x to 4x optical. Obviously sounds like a 1x step backwards, I think, until you kind of dig into what they actually did. So they put a 48 megapixel sensor behind that 4x lens and then use in-sensor cropping to get near optical quality all the way to 8x. So Samsung sells a true 5x periscope telephoto at 50 megapixels, a separate 3x, and then an optical quality zoom they can claim goes up to 10x. Video, slightly different conversation than photos. I think it's one where the two phones I thought split more clearly. This is a big deal for Samsung. iPhone video has a smoothness and kind of depth to it that Samsung hasn't caught up to. Gap's not huge, and the S26 Ultra shoots really good video, but side by side on a real sample, the iPhone wins. What Samsung added this year, it generally surprised me, is horizontal lock. You turn it on, do whatever you want with the phone, way recording footage, it stays perfect. If you shoot handheld videos of kids running or sort of anything that requires you keeping a frame steady while you're also moving, this is epic for that. Samsung also added APV. That was kind of their answer to ProRes and shooting log and then editing that right in their gallery app without touching a laptop. I thought that was a pretty cool addition too. For anyone creating content seriously, I thought the S26 Ultra's toolset is way more complete now. For everyone else, the iPhone just shoots cleaner video without you having to think about it. Off the camera and onto performance, I'm gonna be very candid here. This is part of every flagship comparison where I struggle to stay awake if I'm watching anybody else's videos here. Both chips are dumb fast. To the point where talking about how fast they are is pointless. You're not going to feel a difference scrolling Instagram. You're not gonna feel a difference answering emails or browsing web pages. Where it does show up is in sustained workloads, long video recording sessions, extended gaming, anything that keeps the processor cooking for a long time. Both phones handle that well now thanks to thermal improvements. One thing worth knowing though is a lot of Samsung's AI features, things like object erasure, generative editing, do need a server connection to process. Apple handles more of that stuff on the device itself. For most people, you probably never notice, but if you ever tried to edit a photo like on an airplane and hit a wall, anyway, that's why. Battery is another one where the headline numbers tell you almost nothing useful. S26 Ultra on its 6th year with a 5,000 mAh cell battery. Same number since the S20 Ultra, which I guess is Samsung's commitment to not changing anything. The iPhone lands over 5,000 mAh. On paper, basically identical. In practice, over 6-ish weeks of heavy usage, iPhone edge out Samsung a little bit, but not by much. And battery tests are so subjective anyway. My third-party apps are different than your third-party apps. Both of these phones, though, are full-day phones. Where Samsung does win decisively, though, is charging. 60-watt charging versus the iPhone, still 40-watt. Means if you're walking out the door at 15%, Samsung gets you sort of back to something useful faster. When we're talking about what makes S26 Ultra distinct, the S Pen, it's still in there, still works, still doesn't have Bluetooth, so remote shutter days are still gone. It is a good stylus for notes and signing things. Most people, I think, will probably not use it. People who do rely on a stylus, though, you know who you are, and no other flagship gives you sort of this built-in option like Samsung does. Software is where I think this comparison gets, at least to me, was more surprising. And I say that as someone who's been watching Samsung software story almost since like the beginning. And for years, the knock on Samsung was that One UI was bloated, was unstable, full of duplicate apps that people weren't asking for, and the AI features felt kind of bolted on rather than built in. That's not where Samsung is anymore at all. Their software in 26 is legit good, legit stable, legit clean, and the AI stuff has quietly crossed from gimmick to, I think, really helpful. Meanwhile, iOS 26, I think it's safe to say, had a rougher launch than expected. Bugs, crashes, things that just didn't work the way they should have out of the gate. And Apple has smoothed it out. But for a while, Samsung was the more stable daily driver, which is not a sentence I expected to say. Apple, I think, still has the edge on long-term software support and ecosystem integration, but Samsung closed that gap this year, and Apple, I think, made it easier for them by kind of stumbling originally. So here's where I land after 6 weeks. The better phone in 2026 is the Samsung. We have more camera flexibility, better charging, generally innovative display, even with its trade-offs, and software that has closed the gap that I didn't think Samsung would close this fast. Apple gave them some ground this year, and Samsung, I thought, took it and ran. But I still have an iPhone in my pocket, because which phone is better and which phone you should buy are not always the same answer. If your Apple Watch is on your wrist, your family's on iMessage, and your laptop's a Mac, none of Samsung's spec sheet's gonna matter to you at all. You're not switching, and you probably shouldn't. The 17 Pro Max or 17 Pro is a fantastic phone. If you're coming from an S23 Ultra or older, Samsung's a move. The jump in performance, cameras, charging, software is substantial enough you will feel it every single day. If you're on the S25 Ultra, I would wait. not enough here to justify the upgrade, and your money is probably better saved for Gen 2 of privacy display. But if you are genuinely starting fresh, no ecosystem, allegiances pulling you either direction, Samsung built a more complete device, and I think that they earned this one with some new innovative features.